Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to episode 49. We're doing part 2, and this is, I guess, a special of round birthday albums. We started out in part 1 looking at albums that turned 50 this year, taking a look at some of the albums of 1972, and I picked 7 of my favorites, as well as listed several dozens of albums that were released that year, just to give an idea of what was happening that year in the music scene. And this time in part 2, we're going to take a look at albums that turned 40. So we're looking at 1982. Now, this is probably the year that I know best, because 1982 was the year that I really started paying attention. 1981 was the year I got into music, and 1982 I started to buy my first magazines. I stayed up to watch Friday night videos and Good Rockin' Tonight, and so I had a pretty I don't know, I was immersed in the scene. Everything that I liked, I was hunting for, and of course all the stuff that I didn't care for, but classmates and my sister liked, and so on. So just to take a look at what was happening in 1982, this was actually very interesting. But let's look at some of the albums here. First, Michael Jackson's Thriller was released in 1982. One of the biggest albums ever in pop music. Then you had Prince, 1999. I had no idea that his 1999 album was from 1982. I thought it was later on. Toto, I remember that song, the song Africa, the Rains Down in Africa. I still actually like that song. The Go-Go's, I think it was their second album. The Cure, releasing an album, I think it was called Pornography. Adam Ant, Paul McCartney had yet another album. John Cougar Mellencamp, John Cougar with Little Ditty About Jack and Diane. Yeah, that was one of those classic songs, whatever. You just heard it everywhere back in that time. Adam Ant, I don't remember the song. You don't drink, don't smoke, what do you do? That was Adam Ant, wasn't it? Yeah. Did I put Paul McCartney twice, or did I skip Adam Ant? Not sure. Down the list, Billy Idol. White Wedding was 1982. I kind of always thought that was 83. Culture Club, I forget what song, but anyway, yeah, Culture Club had an album, and there was Boy George, who at first we weren't really sure if he was a boy, but then also that year, Grace Jones put out an album, and Grace Jones was a woman where kind of looked like maybe she was trying not to be one. I don't know. But I remember I think it was Conan the Barbarian, the second movie, she was in that, and she was this like fierce warrior, fearless, and she was scared of a mouse. And when she started screaming and looking scared, everybody was like, it must be something really terrible. And then it was a mouse. I like Grace Jones, though. I think she was cool. Not her music, I don't know about that, but anyway, her as an actress. Okay, Grace Jones, Culture Club, Duran Duran had their album Rio. Depeche Mode, A Broken Frame. I don't know what songs were on that, but the album cover, A Broken Frame, I believe it was a farmer woman with a sickle harvesting wheat, perhaps in the Ukraine, and that actually the same photo appeared on the cover of an issue of, I think it was Life magazine and Photographs of the Decade that came out in 1989, so photographs from the 1980s, and that same photo was on the cover of that. I have it somewhere, probably in a box, because I'm into photography, right? So I think my mom bought that for me. Anyway, Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, Roxy Music, Avalon, and now 1972, the Roxy Music released their debut album. I don't know about Roxy Music so well, but I think Avalon was actually the last album, if I got that correctly. Kate Bush, she was kind of a big thing. 1982. Blondie, Spandau Ballet, Flock of Seagulls, all those kind of interesting bands coming up from the late 70s and early 80s with... Anyway, Blondie, of course, is legendary, and Flock of Seagulls, legendary for the haircuts. Split Ends from New Zealand. They have a couple of songs I actually like. Haircut 100 was just a name. I can't name any of their songs, but why I put them in on the list here is because one member from Haircut 100 actually co-wrote and I think co-produced or produced an album by a Japanese artist named Hiko, who had 2 EPs around 1999, 2000, and I really liked her EPs. After she did her first full-length album, I didn't really care for that music so much, but it was a little bit more rock and a little bit more powerful on those EPs. And that was one person from Haircut 100 who yeah, worked with her on that. Men Without Hats from Canada. I don't know, was that Safety Dance in 1982? And then, now this was an interesting list here because I was reading that, you know, punk rock, of course, in the latter half of the 70s really becoming big. And then early 80s, there seemed to be like, from punk rock, you started to get some of the new wave bands. I'm not really interested in that area, so I've only picked up a few bits and pieces off the internet. But it seems that was kind of happening, like punk rock was starting to diversify, like people from punk rock were moving on into other things and using synthesizers or other types. But there was this other aspect of punk rock, which was the hardcore punk rock, which seems to really have been developing in 1982. And I've got The Descendants, Milo Goes to College, as an 82 album. The Clash, okay, they're more traditional punk rock, British punk, but you had Bad Religion, Bad Brains, The Misfits, The Dead Kennedys, all these guys coming around 1982 with albums. And then a band I'd never heard of before called Christian Death, and an album, Only Theater of Pain. I was really curious about this because it was called Death Rock. So I gave it a listen on YouTube, and yeah, the guitar work is really gritty, and it does have a kind of like a proto-extreme metal kind of feel to it, but the vocal style is this kind of exaggerated British accent style of singing that you would hear in bands, I don't know, like Joy Division or Depeche Mode or that kind of thing, that kind of exaggerated British accent style of singing. So there's that with the more kind of gritty guitar sound. Not something I would probably want to get, but interesting to hear. Yeah. And then Eloy from Germany, prog rock band from the 70s, carrying on. The curious thing is, like in the early 1980s, checking the list of progressive rock albums, it's pretty small. Most of the prog rock bands had tried to reformulate their styles to fit into kind of more modern pop styles. And prog rock, like if you go to progressive, let's see, Prog Archives, and check, just use the preset algorithm for the top 100 prog rock albums ever, but go in and change it to 1982, it gives you 35. Doesn't mean there was only 35 albums that fall into that category. It's just like with all other settings being what they are, you'll get 35 albums. But Kate Bush is in there, Eloy is in there. And then 12th Night, which is one of the neo-prog bands to start this well, of course, the neo-prog movement is often said to have started with Genesis and Trick of the Tail, and of course Saga in the late 70s. But the British new bands, including like Marillion, IQ, Palace, Galahad, and those guys, yeah, 12th Night is one of the first ones to actually release an album in 1982. Okay. The Dregs, formerly the Dixie Dregs, I think they changed the name to Dregs with Industrial Standard. That was Steve Morse's band. He was in there. Whoops, I scrolled too far. Van Halen, Diver Down. Never had it, but that had their cover of Pretty Woman on there. Queen, Hot Space, their most curious album in their discography, I think. Going for more of a funky dance style, thanks to the success of Another One Bites the Dust from the previous album. This is the album, though, that has Under Pressure on there, which is the one really cool song. And there is, I think there are one or two other hard rock songs on Hot Space, in spite of things like Body Language and whatever being on there. Asia come out with their debut album, which, according to Wikipedia, became the #1 album in the US for a while, and the song Heat of the Moment. And that's kind of a big thing because Asia was John Wetton on vocals and bass, formerly with UK and King Crimson. It was Jeff Downes on keyboards, formerly of Yes and also the Buggles, and still with Yes now. It was Steve Howe on guitar, formerly of Yes, and it was Carl Palmer on drums. So you have all these like big prog rock guys from the 70s coming out on this band in the 80s, and I never gone into Asia, but I keep thinking I should check them out more. Okay, now, let's see here. Now, my picks. Let's go. All right, I already talked about this album not that long ago. This is Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. This was one of those albums that just made me go, wow, this is incredible stuff. Hearing this after listening to mostly AC/DC or like a little bit of like Van Halen and Black Sabbath, and then hearing this really, really blew me away. And this was also, a lot of people regard this as one of their best, if not the best album, and some people like Martin Popoff, who is the author of this book behind me, says it is about half hair metal and half really good metal. So I don't know. I'm with Sam Dung of Headbangers Banger TV, Sam Dunn of Banger TV and Headbangers Journey and so on. Yeah, he loves this album. So do I. Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. Love it. Then, of course, kind of almost a counterpart in a way. This is Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast, one of the most well-known metal albums of all time. Some would say that it's still, I think it was, Martin Popoff again, saying that there's still some weak tracks on here. Iron Maiden really haven't discovered themselves completely yet, but of course this is where Bruce Dickinson is in on vocals for the first time, and Clive Burr is in on drums for the last time. But I love this album. I remember hearing like The Prisoner when I was, I don't know, however old I was, 1982. So yeah, about 11 years old, and hearing The Prisoner, and I just love that. Love that, and the title track is awesome, and Hallowed Be Thy Name is brilliant, and there's a lot of really good stuff on here anyway. I like this album. Obviously, it's in my 7 picks for 1982. Now here's a cool one. This is Y&T Black Tiger. The classic Y&T lineup. Leonard Hayes, Joey Alves, Phil Kenmore, and Dave Meniketti. This here, the first time featuring the metal Y&T logo, Black Tiger. The previous album, Earthshaker from 1981, I think it was more of an intense, really aggressive rock album. This one here, they're kind of getting a little more cool, I think. But you can hear also in the title track Dave Meniketti's signature guitar solo trick where he flicks the tremolo switch while picking, so you get this kind of chopping effect of the guitar. Really awesome. Lots of great songs on here. I actually did Winds of Change. We had to do in my grade 10 English class a song. You write out all the lyrics, and then you tell a little bit about the band. Then you play the song with the lyrics on the overhead projector, and then afterwards you ask 3 questions to the other students about the song, the meaning of the lyrics. And I picked Winds of Change for that here. Y&T, I used to have the Mean Streak back patch for the next album that came after this. I think I was one of 2 or 3 people in my school who listened to Y&T. Love them though. This period here during the 80s, from Earthshaker through to In Rock We Trust, and a little bit also Down for the Count. Loved it. Contagious was also good. 10, yeah. But this part right here in the early half of the 80s, loved them best, and Black Tiger is wonderful. Hey, Scorpions and Blackout. Not exactly my favorite Scorpions album, but certainly this one, before I got into the Scorpions, this was the album that was out that everyone was talking about. My friends' older brothers had this, and we started talking about, what was it, No One Like You, and the song really had a blackout, baby. And one of the ones I really like on here is China White. Scorpions had this thing for a while where they would do like an album of like 8 fun hard rockin' tracks, 1 power ballad, and then 1 more serious, heavy toned song. And this one here, it was China White. Yeah. Great album. I actually kind of like Love at First Sting a little bit more, but this is brilliant. Love that cover. There was a story about Iron Maiden and Scorpions touring together, and Iron Maiden doing a prank on the Scorpions, I think dropping bags of flour on their head or something. So at the end of Iron Maiden's show, all the guys on... No, it was the other way around. Scorpions dropped flour on Iron Maiden's heads during the show. So at the end of the show, all the guys of Iron Maiden came out with bandages on their heads and forks covering their eyes like this. I think that's what it was anyway. I probably read that in a circus magazine back in the 1980s, but yeah. Okay, another really cool album to come out. This is Anvil, Metal on Metal. The title track, I just love that. This is an album that seems to be following what Judas Priest was doing and then giving it just that little extra kick. You know, like people were saying that this album and these kind of early Anvil albums anyway is kind of the link between British new wave of heavy metal and extreme metal, more like thrash metal. Like this is the kind of the step in between here. And certainly, yeah, some of these songs, they remind me a lot of Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, but then other songs just have that little bit extra, you know? So anyway, Metal on Metal by Anvil. And moving a little bit away from heavy metal now, the reason why I have the Rush book in the background, Rush Signals. I really like the Permanent Waves Moving Pictures Signals trio. I think I mentioned that in a previous video about trilogies, like 3 excellent albums together. Y&T's Black Tiger was also mentioned in that one. Rush Signals. And one thing I really loved, like a lot of people were saying that, you know, the synthesizers were coming in more, and so Alex Lifeson's guitar solos were kind of disappearing, but he does a lot of brilliant solos on this album. And one of the things I really like, Subdivisions has the keyboards in for the chorus, and then less keyboards for the verse and more guitar, whereas Analog Kid has the keyboards for the verses and then more guitar for the chorus, I think it was. And there's some, yeah, I think it was Analog Kid has that great bass at the intro, like the guitar is the rhythm and the bass is the lead. Really cool stuff. Yeah, Chemistry and Digital Man and Losing It and New World Man, Countdown. I don't know. This, for me, like this was the last of the really cool Rush albums I could get into. Grace Under Pressure was still kind of there. Power Windows, it depends on my mood. But yeah, Signals, I still really dig it. I think it was great. Okay, and then a non-metal album, not even really hard rocking album, Alan Parsons' project Eye in the Sky. I loved that song. That song was on the radio a lot. I really loved it. And you know, they have the intro at the beginning called Sirius. It has that kind of more moody, atmospheric feel to it, and often used, I think there was some football team that used it as their intro when the players come onto the field. And one day the radio station played it. I'd never heard that intro before. And as the intro was playing, I guess the DJ was doing something, and he was like saying, we can focus it to a fuzzy treble, or make it to low bass.
We can speed things up so fast.
Or we can make things so slow.
Kind of like this. Like, I don't know, he was just goofing around. I thought it was part of the song. When I finally got the album 5 years later, when I finally thought maybe it's okay for me to buy an album that's not metal, yeah, I got this, and hey, what happened to that thing with the speeding up and slowing down? It's not on here. But yeah, I really like this album, and it's an amazing thing that there's like 2 guys writing the music and writing the lyrics, and one of them is playing and singing, and then the rest is another band that's hired in to play all the music that they've written together. And 2 other guys also singing lead vocals. So I think you have 3 lead vocalists singing on their albums. And just really great variety of stuff on here, like the Psychobabble, I think is good. Mama Gama, which is an instrumental. Silence and I, Children of the Moon, Old and Wise. Yeah, I love this album. I think I had it on cassette and later on CD, and then bought it again on remastered CD with bonus tracks. Yeah, maybe my favorite Alan Parsons Project album, actually. Okay, so that's some of what was going on in 1982. And just to mention a few other things here before we sign off for part 2 of this video. Venom Black Metal, which seems to have recently been showing up on some lists I was checking about very important albums of the year. Accept Restless and Wild, bringing us into the speed metal era in some songs. I still actually prefer Balls to the Wall, but Restless and Wild just has that. Fast as the Shark and so on. Love the beginning of that with the album scratching, the little kind of yodeling and accordion singing, and then suddenly it scratches and Udo Dirkschneider goes, ah! And the song starts. Anyway, other albums, Tank releasing their debut and their second album, a British new wave of heavy metal. Twisted Sister with their debut Under the Blade. Manowar coming out. Discharge. I've heard about them. I heard they were really influential on Bathory and Celtic Frost. I went and listened to them on YouTube, what they had in 1981, EP in 81 and an album in 82. It's not my taste in a way, but you can really hear that gritty, raw guitar sound and the rougher vocals, almost shouted vocals. It does still sound to me more like a kind of hardcore punk, but going beyond what a lot of other hardcore punk bands are doing, I think. I think the thing that I don't like about it so much, I just found that the riffs were really simple, at least from what I heard. And then when I went and listened to Bathory's debut album after that, I felt, yeah, this is more like metal riffing, the Bathory album. But anyway, Discharge, very important band to influence the extreme metal genre in the early 1980s. Other releases, Gillan releasing his final album, Ian Gillan's band Gillan releasing their final album. Whitesnake, Robert Plant with Pictures at 11, Diamond Head, another album out, Night Ranger's debut, Witchfinder General's debut, one of the early doom metal bands, Michael Schenker Group, of course. In Canada, we had Triumph with Never Surrender, Santers, their second album, Racing Time, Lee Aaron Project, the first of the Lee Aaron albums. Chilliwack, not a metal band, a rock band, but with their album Opus X and What You Gonna Do When I'm Gone, What You Gonna Do. April Wine, Power Play, which was kind of a mediocre album actually after Nature of the Beast. And but they did have one interesting song on there called If You See K. If You See K, and it's kind of funny because, yeah, If You See K, If You See K. Maybe not the first band or the only band to do it, but yeah, funny. And one other thing here, Exciter begin recording their debut album near the end of 1982, Metal Maniac. Another key point in the jump towards extreme metal in North America, Anvil and Exciter. And then Voivod forms in 1982. And that's all I gotta say about 1982. My 7 picks for my favorite albums, some of my favorite albums, and a view of what was going on at the time. And there it is. See you in the next part 3 where we're going to look at 1992. Okay, thanks for watching today. Catch you next time.